I'm in Tokyo today and it's raining outside. So what better reason to make a movie about an eccentric American character actor that cruised around in a steam-powered houseboat named the Aunt Polly and lived in a castle called the Seventh Sister. I mean, why not? William Gillette was born into privilege in Hartford, Connecticut 10 years before the Civil War. He was a contemporary of Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe. He left home at 20 to pursue his acting career. He was married by 29, widowed by 35, never had any children, and lived well into his 80s, never marrying again. Early in his career, Gillette figured out the path to fame and fortune was not only acting, but also writing and producing. And he did all these things exceedingly well. By the time we got to the late 1890s, he was one of the most famous and most successful actors in America. He was also highly innovative. He had 4 patents, including one for producing the sound of a horse, both coming and going. Clearly the man lived in a much simpler time. In the 1890s, Arthur Conan Doyle decided he wanted to bring his Sherlock Holmes story to the stage. William Gillette stepped in and helped create a 4-act play of Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories. He debuted this in New York on Broadway in 1899 and brought it to London in 1901. All totaled, Gillette starred in this play more than 1,300 times in his career. It defined him. He also experimented with a number of props that helped define who Sherlock is in our minds, including the deerskin cap, the magnifying glass, and that bent briar pipe. He also worked on a silent film version of Sherlock Holmes in 1916, and all the way up into the 1930s, when he was in his 80s, was experimenting with bringing the Sherlock story to the radio.
I couldn't take it out of the house that first night like a straightforward thief, because it could have been recovered at law. And for that reason, I swindled you out of it.
William Gillette decided he wanted to retire from acting and threatened to do this many, many times. In 1902, he bought a steam-powered tugboat, converted it into a houseboat, and named it the Aunt Polly. Once, when cruising the Connecticut River, he stumbled upon 7 hills called the Seven Sisters in Hadlyme and decided this would be the place that he would build his retirement home. This 14,000-foot retirement home that he spent $1 million on was designed to look like a castle. It had secret passageways and hidden doors, and Gillette used this to entertain and surprise his guests, ever the dramatic flair of this eccentric actor. William Gillette was a huge fan of railroads. He had a 3-mile-long narrow-gauge railroad laid out on the Seven Sisters property. He had a steam locomotive and an electric locomotive designed, and he would use this to tour his guests around the property across trestles and through tunnels and all kinds of interesting switches that he had built. The engines themselves are still on display at Gillette Castle today. The track's long gone. Most of it was wiped out in the hurricane of 1938. If you do visit the Gillette Castle, make sure you cross the Connecticut River on the Chester Hadlyme Ferry. It costs $5, takes 5 minutes. There's been a ferry at this location for 250 years, and the ferry itself can only carry 6 cars at a time. It's a real throwback to a much simpler time, a time that Mark Twain really defined what life on the Connecticut River was all about. Yeah, it's still raining out there. Let's close this video out. Gillette remained active in acting well into his 80s. He died in 1937 in Hartford at the age of 83. He's buried in Farmington, Connecticut next to his wife. He was a very eccentric man, as I've said, and those eccentricities live on in this castle, which is owned by the state of Connecticut and open to the public, where you can see the life that he lived. He also contributed a number of things to pop culture. For example, he wrote the line, "Elementary, my dear Watson, elementary," which really defines who Sherlock Holmes is.
Marvelous, marvelous. Elementary, my dear fellow, elementary.
So with that, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, think about subscribing to the channel, and I will see you again in another video real soon. Thank you, take care, and bye-bye.